This episode is brought by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you!
Hello everyone and welcome to another Dino Doc accuracy review, except this time there are barely any dinosaurs. In my Prehistoric Planet review, I asked if there were any documentaries focused specifically on pterosaurs, considering how heavily they featured. Soon after, I got a lot of suggestions to watch the 2010 film Flying Monsters, created by National Geographic, Atlantic Productions, and Sky 3D, which was a British channel I'm too American to have heard of. This program follows the legendary David Attenborough as he guides us through the evolutionary history of pterosaurs, meeting some famous standouts along the way. Listen guys, this has David Attenborough and is by National Geographic. I shouldn't have to tell you anything else. You know this is gonna be a good time considering how long they've dominated the top spots. I would call this the greatest crossover of all time, but Batman met the Ninja Turtles, so not quite. So guys, let's dig this up. Thank God our pterosaur adventure came from National Geographic. You know, the ones who actually cared about creating solid paleo content. Can you imagine if this was made by Discovery or History? Oh my God! Here we get a nice blend of paleontological history from a few hundred years ago, alongside the evolutionary history of the flying reptiles. No, these flying reptiles. Good. Not a negative in terms of the science, but this did cause a bit of confusion since the two don't perfectly line up. Of course, paleontologists don't find paleofauna in chronological order, so there is some jumping back and forth of when and where the animals were found. But hey, there is still some fascinating history in there. It's great seeing the filmmakers give credit to Mary Anning, an amateur fossil hunter from England during the early 1800s, who, along with her brother, made extraordinary discoveries. Here, the original plesiosaur skeleton is highlighted as an achievement of hers, alongside our first main subject, Dimorphodon. Not mentioned, but it is worth a shout out how Anning also found the first ichthyosaur skeleton, making revolutionary discoveries into several famous prehistoric lineages, and each of these coming from the early Jurassic as well. So yeah, great that Mary Anning is given recognition because 200 years ago, she certainly was not.
1, she's a female. 2, she's not a boy. And 3, and most importantly, she's a girl!
Most of the creature designs are really good. If Flying Monsters came out today, I'd still be impressed. There are some nice animalistic features to help prevent the pterosaurs from looking like monstrous dragons. I didn't watch a clickbait top 5 scariest pterosaurs or something. A certain smoothness and elegance is present that tells my brain these were real creatures that once existed. Each subject also possesses a smattering of pycnofibers, here called fur or fur-like structures, which is awesome to see so early on, while most others were neglecting this. The origins of these filaments are left up in the air, but at this point, it seems likely that we can just call them feathers. The origins of feathers keep going further and further back, going from just the theropods to being present at the beginnings of Dinosauria, now up to some Triassic Archosaur ancestor of both pterosaurs and dinosaurs. These were avimetatarsalian archosaurs, as opposed to the more croc-like Pseudosuchian branch of the family tree, which, yes, includes crocodilians. Because we now think that they appeared in early avimetatarsalian ancestors, feathers would be homologous to both dinosaurs and pterosaurs, evolving once, then being inherited by both groups, rather than popping up separately through convergence. So we don't need a different name, pycnofibers, we can just call them both feathers. Some other features I liked were the palms that face outwards in something like a pushing position. Like their dinosaur relatives, the hands are commonly placed in the wrong position, so glad to see the creators got this correctly. As I've hammered home in previous videos, pterosaur wings should fold backwards during terrestrial locomotion as the flyers walked quadrupedally. Sometimes you see the wings snap, folding upwards, which, poor guys. Those wings too, the brachiopatagium, look very good, supported by an extremely long fourth finger as opposed to bats with several fingers making up the wing. These also connect all the way down to the ankles, which is the most supported position so far. It's funny seeing those reconstructions where the wings end at the body or the hip. Nice try, buddy.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Another win for the documentary is showing the bone structure of these predators. Similar to theropods, their bones are hollow, allowing them to be lightweight, perfect for flight. But then this leaves a problem. If the bones are hollow, then shouldn't they be super fragile? Would they not be able to support the large masses of the larger pterosaurs? Well, they found a solution, having strands or beams running inside the bones to provide extra support, so even biplane-sized creatures could be light enough for flight. It is worth mentioning that at about this time came ideas of large pterosaurs such as Pteranodon, Quetzalcoatlus, being too heavy to fly, or maybe they were able to just glide off cliffs, but no powered flight for them. Yeah, this is not the case. They were fully capable of flight, as we know. They had many adaptations such as this that allowed them to fly. Oh, look, it's Quetzalcoatlus. Maybe we should talk about it, as well as the other species now. Well, what can I say? The majority of them are great, perhaps even rivaling the very recent depictions of Prehistoric Planet. That's how good they are. Quetzalcoatlus is correctly shown in Maastrichtian Texas, though maybe early at 70 million years ago when the earliest record is dated to 68 million years ago, then living until the KPG extinction event. This places it in the Javelina Formation, though potentially it lived further north in Hell Creek alongside Tyrannosaurs and Triceratops. Attenborough describes them as scavengers, but are also depicted eating lizards because, yeah, they probably gobbled up small vertebrates. Who knows, next maybe they can take on a fully grown T-Rex.
You serious?
Quetzal is given a weight of 2 adult humans because us Americans will use anything but the metric system. Despite attaining the dimensions of biplanes, yeah, those hollow bones and air sacs only put them at about 500 pounds or 227 kilograms, which blew my mind when I first read that years ago. Perhaps 2 obese or super jacked adults, but still a pretty good description. Pteranodon longiceps makes a brief yet impressive appearance soaring through the skies. Sorry P. Sternbergi or Geosternbergia, maybe next time. This famous species is placed a little late at 80 million years ago when they would have flown 84.5 at the latest. But still, they have a nice design, even implementing the sexual dimorphism in the crests. Males were much larger, correctly stated to have an 18-foot wingspan and an elongate crest, while females had a shorter crest and wingspan of just 12 feet. Not much else is said about Pteranodon, unfortunately, but you can check out my review of Dead Sound Sea and Sky. Yeah, it's P. Sternbergi, but much of the information still relevant. One animal we've seen briefly is the beautifully crested tapeyara from Brazil. I love how colorful these artists made their crests, since these were obviously important sexual social display items. I say obviously, there's one paleontologist featured who couldn't figure that out and believes these to be sails, or maybe more accurately to what he's describing, rudders. Apparently, the wings are catching the wind while tapeyara uses its head to steer. I don't know, man. To me, it doesn't look like anything is pushing them forwards. Kinda like they're just flying. Not in a pterosaur way, but more Superman. Maybe someone with more nautical knowledge can actually back this off, but it looks goofy to me, and apparently it did to the filmmakers, because they call display a much more likely use of the crest. It's as if that paleontologist was spitballing random ideas while the director was like, yeah, that's nice, buddy. Dang, that's crazy. And he just wouldn't stop. Also a flyer, though not a pterosaur, is Anchiornis, appearing as prey for Darwinopterus in late Jurassic China. The two are placed at 150 million years ago, about 10 million years too late, because man, whoever wrote this just couldn't get those dates right. At least we know how Anchiornis looked, including the coloration, and it's exactly like this.
It's beautiful.
We do get one pterosaur who doesn't quite reach the same heights as the others, but we'll get to that later. Overall, the designs are pretty spot on with a comprehensive understanding of pterosaur anatomy, not taken out of some random page in a picture book. When it comes to the progression and evolution of pterosaurs throughout the Mesozoic, Flying Monsters does a pretty good job and gives a nice overview of the different changes they experience. We see a good contrast between the earlier, more basal, so-called rhamphorhynchoids, which is an informal term since they didn't form a natural and separate grouping, from the later, more derived pterodactyloids, which do seem like a natural grouping. These later guys often, but not always, had longer wings, stubby tails, longer heads, longer necks, elaborate crests, and many lacked teeth entirely. As for the more basal flyers, well, just flip everything I said.
Wait a minute. Strike that. Reverse it.
But we do get some nice nuance, how it's not entirely black and white. These guys have this and those other guys have that. No, that's not really the case since different features appeared at different times leading up to the pterodactyloids, as is the case in Darwinopterus and other Wukongopterids, which had a mixture of the primitive and derived features. Much of this covered very well. Epic. I mentioned before how one of these is not like the others. One subject doesn't receive the same level of scrutiny as its counterparts, and that sadly is Dimorphodon, the one pterosaur it seems that filmmakers just can't get right. While everyone else is beautifully resurrected on screen, this guy is...
He's ugly! 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 Ugly!
Will I ever stop referencing BioShock? No. Will it ever stop being my favorite piece of media ever?
Never.
Going back to a face just as spliced up, yeah, Dimorphodon is shrink wrapped to heck. It's like the animators wanted to show off every lump and bump and crease in the skull, though this is not how animals work, usually. Insert plug for my previous video. To pour gasoline on this fire, the skull is seemingly widened for a more piranha-like appearance. I don't know, maybe the animators wanted a more threatening critter, especially with that snaggletooth look already. But this is the one pterosaur that gets somewhat monsterfied. Other than that, yeah, we got that accurately large head, long tail, feathering, and...
Good Lord, what is happening in there?
One feature that took me by surprise were the big, I guess you could call them, skirts seen in the pterosaurs Dimorphodon, Rhamphorhynchus, and Darwinopterus. Pretty much the more basal side of Pterosauria. There's this layer of skin membrane stretching out between much of the legs. A fifth toe is even present in these guys to support such a structure. Now, from what I've read, if the tail is encased in the skirt, then we call it a uropatagium. A specimen of Sortes has been interpreted to have this back flap. However, Flying Monsters portrays a cruropatagium where it doesn't connect to the tail. After taking to the internet for a day, I still can't find clear, concise answers since it's up in the air for both rhamphorhynchoids and pterodactyloids. The shape and appearance of this back membrane seems to change depending on who you ask. And, of course, Pterosauria is a very diverse order, so the shape and form of these back skirts, uropatagium or cruropatagium, is likely to have varied between different lineages. If you viewers know of solid leads, please leave them in the comments below because I'm lost. Maybe we just need more research on this. Although the overall changes shown in Pterosauria throughout the Mesozoic are generally well understood, well, all that good stuff is generally in the middle during the mid to late Jurassic. The middle is good. It's the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end of the great flyers, that makes me go... At the start of the documentary, the ancestors of pterosaurs are compared to gliding lizards of the present in the Southeast Asian genus Draco. The flying lizards extend their ribs to create wings that allow them to glide across the rainforests. Now, this isn't to throw shade at these modern marvels, but they're not good analogs for the pterosaur ancestors. The lineage leading up to our subjects is still very mysterious and has been the cause of much debate. Paleontologists weren't sure if they evolved from arboreal gliding critters or terrestrial running and jumping ones, though there are some ancient archosaurs who give us some clues. Small avimetatarsalian predators such as Scleromochlus share many features in common with pterosaurs and are probably close relatives despite not having wings. Because of this, such reptiles are considered pterosauromorphs, not quite there but on the way to the true pterosaurs. And due to the gliding lizard connection being in the negatives, you can already assume that an arboreal ancestry is incorrect, since most scientists currently support the ground-up hypothesis. Early pterosauromorphs would run and jump trying to catch small insects. Having that small membrane gave them an advantage in their jumping and catching, so this membrane became favored and eventually evolved into the wing. But I gotta say, during the Triassic, there were actually gliding reptiles out there, such as Charovipteryx, but they're no longer thought to be close relatives to pterosaurs. Skipping over to the end of the flying reptiles, this also could have been handled better. There's this common myth that the new vertebrate reptilian flyers, the birds, began to slowly outcompete those old bag losers.
I can't f***ing compete! I just can't f***ing compete!
Yeah, you may remember this getting some screen time in Walking with Dinosaurs, and unfortunately, it comes back around here. It's even said that their fate was sealed by early birds. This could be a future paleo myth, but to be brief, no. Birds were not outcompeting pterosaurs or pushing them out of their niches or anything like that. A lack of pterosaur diversity by the end of the Cretaceous seems to be more a problem with sampling, that we haven't found them yet with a lack of good Maastrichtian deposits that would preserve them in marine settings. So, all we get are Asdarchids. In 2018, saw the extension of 2 additional lineages to the end of the Cretaceous, with the descriptions of Tetradraco, a pteranodonted, along with Barbaridactylus, Alcyone, and Simurgia, all being nyctosaurids or just outside of that family for the latter 2. Will we find any late Tapeyards or Anhanguerids? Who knows, maybe not, but that's more evidence that pterosaurs were not already on their way out. Plus, birds and pterosaurs were able to coexist for nearly 100 million years. The two were occupying different niches and able to coexist. Perhaps not always peacefully, but they still lived and thrived together. One example I found is in early Cretaceous China in the Yixian Formation. You'll find a whole smorgasbord of both birds and pterosaurs, tons of both lineages. So yeah, no, one was not pushing out the other. Then why did pterosaurs go extinct? While the documentary wants to jump through all these hoops of the birds evolving and the meteor putting the other guys out of their misery, no, it was just a meteor, guys. The Chicxulub impact about 66 million years ago, rather than the 65 million years commonly pushed and said here too. The pterosaurs were entirely wiped out. The vast majority of birds went extinct too, though a few survived due to some being very small, needing less food, and allowing them to take shelter from the catastrophe. And again, still most of them died. Just those few survivors allowed the dinosaurs to live on, rather than their Archosaur avimetatarsalian relatives.
He's dead, another dead one, deady, deadified, 2 more dead from the neck up, dead from the neck down. But that's life.
Before we jump to the conclusion, I do have a few more nitpicks. Yes, pterosaurs were the first vertebrates to take wing, long before the Jurassic birds and Eocene bats. My problem is, the age of pterosaurs changes depending on which line you take from the documentary. The first true members appeared about 228 million years ago during the late Triassic. However, their beginning is stated here to be 220 million years ago. Later, it switches to 150 million years ago, being 50 million years after the origin. Do the quick math, that makes it 200 million years ago in the early Jurassic. Next, it switches back to the late Triassic to 220 by saying that 70 million years ago was 150 million years later. Even if you're wrong, at least get your story straight. Next up, a brief appearance by Archaeopteryx. Its phylogenetic position towards the base of all birds has been in dispute for decades, but aside from that, If it were the first or one of the first birds, then you would just call it a bird, or a dinosaur, or a flying dino, or avian dino. For some reason, it's called half reptile, half bird.
What?
That makes no sense. Birds are reptiles, so it wouldn't be half and half. It would be all reptile and all bird simultaneously. I don't get why programs from this time couldn't just say, birds are dinosaurs. Quetzalcoatlus is oversized with a 50-foot wingspan, which is absurdly huge, in line with very early estimates from the 70s. Nowadays, the wings are thought to have stretched out at around 36 feet, 11 meters. Still gigantic, though not Rodin-sized. Not quite a negative here, Quetzal is called the largest animal to ever fly. I've made this claim too. Yeah, it sounds cool and may very well be the case, but we can't count out the similarly sized, more stoutly built Hatzegopteryx from late Cretaceous Romania. We'll need better specimens of both to be certain, and the movie's not technically wrong. I just wouldn't count out the other guy anymore.
I'm not making the same mistakes again.
No, you're making all new ones.
And finally, it should go without saying, but despite the documentary's name, pterosaurs were not monsters. Instead, simply strange flying reptiles unlike anything we have today. These dudes looked and behaved like animals. The footage itself seems to show this, so I assume the creators just wanted an eye-catching title. Okay, that's all the negatives. Let's bring this to a close. It's not often that I get to indulge in the world of pterosaurs. Despite coming up from time to time, dinosaurs are more my specialty. That means I learned a lot by making this video, having to take a hard look at pterosaur anatomy and phylogeny. Man, these documentaries take you to some weird places. Though not perfect, I definitely enjoyed Flying Monsters as a film and documentary. Paleo enthusiasts can get loads of good information here regarding everyone's favorite not dinosaurs. But some segments don't hold up as well as others. Yeah, I still have some questions. I don't know everything, but all things considered, I'm willing to give Flying Monsters a very good B. Well, not National Geographic's best showing, though still a solid entry for sure. A fine addition to my collection. It's always a pleasure to see David Attenborough on screen. His shows are always awesome. Plus, I got to learn about these strange creatures that once soared our skies. I call this a win-win. So guys, remember if you enjoyed this video to please leave a like, subscribe, and to check out my social media. See you next time.